All of the views and opinions expressed here are those of the individual speaking and may not be representative of Konig American. At times, language may be considered vulgar. Listener discretion is suggested.
You are now listening to the Konig Behind the Wheel podcast.
All right, we're live. Kevin Lawrence, Formula Drift Pro Driver. Are you ready for a 10-question quickfire?
Let's do it.
S chassis or AE86?
AE86.
All right.
Started.
SR20 or KAT?
KA.
What's that one-day dream car that you want to own?
I want one of the old 80s Ford RS200s.
I would have never, ever thought that in a million years.
I like all kinds of weird stuff. So yeah, I've always wanted one of those cars, and to have one of those old groupie cars would just be a blast, I think.
Yeah, that's kind of wild. Let's see, S13, S14, or S15?
We're going for stock body stuff, the S15.
Okay. One drifter that you really looked up to?
Osbo. Watching him come up and, what he, came from and all that overseas and coming over here and being able to dominate was just one of the guys I looked up to.
Right. So you're part of a Nissan camp now. R34 or R35?
I would go R34.
Your favorite track that's not OSW?
Seattle.
If you couldn't drift anymore, but you had to pick one more motorsport, one type of motorsport to do, what would it be?
Probably try and get into the rallycross stuff. I know it's not really big much anymore, but no, it just looked like a blast. Either that or maybe some kind of hill climb.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting, just kind of getting totally out of the element.
Yeah.
Favorite person to tandem with?
Ooh, that's a tough one. So far, for FD stuff or just in general?
It's up to you.
We'll go with FD stuff. Me and Jeff Jones. I like
Okay.
Jeff, yeah, because I know he's going 100% all the time, and I'm trying to do the same thing.
Right.
So when we go, whether it's practice or battles and all that, we're literally just going out there to just pretty much try and play bumper cars with each other. Right,
which is kind of brings a lot of that grassroots feel to it, even though when you're on another level.
Yep, yeah. He's a blast to drive with, so yeah, Jeff Jones for sure.
Awesome. So we made it through the 10-question quickfire there. I'm Scott. I'm the marketing director for Konig Wheels, and with me today is Kevin Lawrence. Kevin Lawrence is a professional drifter that hails from Florida and was the 2017 Formula Drift Pro 2 champion. In 2018, Kevin made his way up the ranks and graduated his program from Pro 2 to Pro. Entering into his second year of Formula Drift competition, Kevin now has a full season under his belt and a loyal following that's ready to root him on. So, Kevin, thanks for doing this, man. I know that kind of this was the run home from work, get ready to sit in front of a camera like everybody wants to do so badly.
No, it's no problem. Yeah, I enjoy doing this stuff. There's not a whole bunch of people that are out there doing it. I've done the Driftcast stuff,
right.
Stuff now, and then I've got some buddies in the Midwest that run a podcast as well that have been on there twice now. So I really enjoy it. It's actually a lot of fun.
Yeah, the podcasting stuff is different just because of the nature of there's not as much on the spot. It's a little bit more informally feeling, and the conversations kind of go in any direction they take off on. So.
Yeah, exactly.
So, real quick before we get started, I want to give people a little bit of context. I mean, for anybody that doesn't know or is under a rock, I mean, we've been working together I think this is the third year.
This is going into fourth now.
Okay. Yeah, so it's our fourth year. And everybody knows that you work and drive for Enjuku Racing. So,
yep.
And with our partner or us, you can definitely buy your wheels from us. So if you want to go ahead and do that, not that I want to be throwing the right hook, but Enjuku's not a bad source for it. So that's our relationship tie. So the last question in my quickfire, I talked about K-Law or Hachi, right? Did I ask you that one, or did I skip one? Ooh,
skip that one.
I skipped one. We only did a 9-question quickfire. All right, that was awful. All right, my last question was K-Law or Hachi.
Hachi's just been around longer, is what people have been always calling me. So
right.
I'm kind of comfortable with that one.
Oh man! All right, so that was awful. Anyhow. So kind of going back to that, some may know you as K-Law, others kind of affectionately refer to you as Hachi, and of course they're referring to kind of your early love of the AE86.
Yep.
So that was
my first car, like my first drift car, like car I kind of built myself. Ended up having a buddy help me. We caged it, did coilover suspension. This is right when like BC first came out with coil. Like they were like one of the first people to come out with coilovers for the 86 that came with like the spindle assembly for it,
right?
Kind of different front suspension. Years ago, and ended up turboing the motor that was in it and played around with that for. I think I had that car for about 10 and a half, 11 years or so.
Right. Did you have that car even while you started to get into some of the S chassis stuff?
No, I ended up selling that car before I really got into all that. I was playing around with it for a while and was like, I'm just going to kind of focus on, other stuff. And I wanted to kind of get things going, as far as like my personal life. I wanted to buy a house. So I ended up actually selling the car to have some extra cash on hand for purchasing a house.
Right.
And about 8 months later, it kind of, everything just went 180 and then I just going right back into driving again. Picked up S13, which ended up being my initial car that I ran through Pro-Am and then my first year Pro 2.
So I always like asking this question, especially to people that are kind of higher up in the rankings of the sports there. How did you get into drifting? Where was that first exposure that brought you into the sport?
I'd say initially it was just friends growing up. I was usually the younger kid in our group growing up, like in our neighborhood. And so a lot of my friends had licenses like 2-3 years before me, and they were all getting into cars. And it was probably around the time like the first Tokyo Drift came out. And then some of my friends were just into cars in general, and my other friends, got wind of drifting and kind of showed me on it. And I was like, oh, it's actually really cool. But it was still a few years out before I'd ever have a car. And so I kind of was just into the car scene. Just did a bunch of research before I even had a car on just what I wanted to get into and all that. And ended up deciding to really get into, a rear-wheel drive car that I could play around with and, start getting into drifting itself. And then eventually around when I was 17 is when I first started at Enjuku. And so I've been, with them for probably 12 or so years now, I guess it's been.
Yeah.
And, so I've just kind of been around drifting really ever since.
And it's probably a good place in Enjuku to be around if you want to be a drifter.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, they've been in it for, I think the first year that we did, like Enjuku did drifting was probably, I think the second year of FD.
Right.
When they did it professionally, and have been in it for almost every year consecutive since. I think, for the longest time we had like the longest running car in FD, which was the old S13 that we built back in maybe 2005, 2006 or so. And that car was running up until about 3 or 4 years ago. It ended up getting sold out, but it was one of the Retax cars I think Turk was driving. He was the last person to drive it.
Okay.
And so, but up until that point, it was like one of the longest running cars that was still in the series. So that was kind of cool to see.
That's interesting only because when you really think about it, Enjuku probably doesn't get the credit they deserve for being around in the pro scene as long as they really have been. I mean, it's 15 years now that FD has been around, so that's 13 solid years basically of professional competition.
Yep. Yeah, we've been in it for probably 12, 13 years or so, and it's, we're probably, I think the longest, actually I think we are the longest running like privateer team.
Right.
Most everyone else that has been running as long as we have all picked up, I think, like factory back, like sponsorships and stuff like that.
So I'm always fascinated, and this is it's a good kind of segue in the sense that I'm always fascinated to find out, especially guys that, all right, so now you're an FD pro, you're at the pinnacle, at least, on this side of the world, you're on the pinnacle of, professional drifting competition. How does that journey look from, the pro-am, the amateur, the pro-am, the grassroots scene, all the way up to where you are today?
I mean, for me, it kind of went pretty quick. I've been around it for so long, so I've known like the level of the sport and known that it's, one of the highest levels that you can get into. And like I said, I ended up selling my initial drift car to buy a house, kind of was like, I'm ready to kind of get out of it for a bit. I'll have just a play around car, but nothing crazy. After I got back into driving again, like 3 months later, we decided we're going to run a Pro-Am down here in Florida. And I went through that, was able to barely take away the championship on that, earned my Pro 2 license,
right.
And then that series was actually an off season series for us because we don't really have much of a winter down here in Florida. And it was a licensing series for Pro 2, but you had to commit to running Pro 2 that fall or that same year. So I ended up going through, running the last event, was able to earn my license, and then had like a month and a half to get the car ready for the first round of Pro 2 in 2015. We ended up campaigning the same car. It was my S13. We just took the same setup I had and turned the power up and was able to run a little bit bigger tire. I think I changed transmission, and we added nitrous to the car, and off we went.
So, when you started out, at what point did you make the progression from the AE86 into an S chassis?
I'd always been like a AE person, and so that was the car I was just committed with keeping for a while, and I always wanted to like progress with and play around with. But for working in Enjuku so long, we've always campaigned S chassis. So I've known my way around the car very well. I've known what setups worked for our drivers in the past. So I would always, when I jumped into driving Pro-Am, I was like, all right, well, I'm going to start with this basic setup that I think is pretty neutral, and then see how I like it. And I can dial it either back or forward how I feel fit for, either that specific track or that event or the car itself, like the power.
Yeah. I don't want to discredit how much work you put in to your program, right? Because, obviously there's a little bit of advantage working for Enjuku, right?
Yeah.
But the one thing I'm chronically fascinated with, how many people really don't give enough credit to how much work it takes to run a program?
I'd say a lot. Like we're in the day of the internet where everyone's got they're not afraid to speak their mind on something that they think is right, and whether they're right or wrong. A lot of people don't see the behind the scenes stuff, like
right.
build up. Even now, like with like blogging and stuff getting bigger, and everyone's doing build videos and just episodes of their events and all that. It really still doesn't even show all of it and all the hard times and all the tough times and all that.
Right.
Like I try and be as active as I can, like my social media with stuff that's going on. And people that have been following me for a year or so now would see that like my first year of pro, last year. Was going to take the car to the dyno, to get it tuned like 3 weeks before the first round.
Yeah.
And the engine locked up on the dyno.
Right.
And spare hadn't been completed being built yet. So the only thing we saw fit to get it, me to the first event in time to, fulfill all my obligations with sponsors and fans and everything like that was we took the demo car that we had.
Right.
And did a crash course thing with pretty much what we did with my Pro-Am car. We really just took the same setup. We turned the power up. We put a bottle on it. We added the fire suppression system in it, some updates to the cage to make it 100% FD legal, and off we went.
Man, I felt so bad for you knowing how much effort and how much work was going in and how many hours you guys were putting in the weeks leading up to Long Beach last year. Because you were grinding and like you were super stressed out, and then to have to do, listen, that was your FD rookie pro debut. Yeah. And then it's like, a couple weeks before, by the way, plans changed. Just hop into this car that you weren't planning on running.
Yeah, no, it was crazy to say the least. We went in and that car, the car is built well. The R32 is a great car, but it was really just built for doing demos with, and it really wasn't made to be competitive.
Right.
And in a week's time, we just threw a bunch of power at it, got it up to tech. And there were certain things that we couldn't even address to have it 100% ready for what it was, because we ended up turning its power up from 500 to around 7 or so, 710, I think is what we ended up dying in the end.
Yeah.
But we weren't able to in time get a set of proper axles for it. We couldn't put a quick change in it. It still ran a 350Z transmission. Like I literally just turned the power up in it and off we went. We were able to, luckily, Drive Chef Shop was able to rush build us a spare set of axles for the stock differential. So I had a spare set of axles, but the only thing we could get out in time was a set of just matching 600 horse axles that we had.
Right.
And, the ones that were in the car had 2 years of demos and practice and just, being driven on and beaten up. And then we go put this, 275 Nexen tire on it, and the car's making a bunch more power.
Right.
My second time pulling in the burnout box to try and make a lap at Long Beach, and it snaps, the shaft on the axle. So, at the end of the day, we went out, we got the axle swap, ended up still having a rough time and wrecking the car. We got all that hammered back out, and I pulled up the line to try and get at least one full of practice right as practice shut down.
Yeah.
So literally my first like practice run full pull at Long Beach was qualifying 1.
Right.
And so it was, once Friday was over and I went through 2 qualifying passes and I got a score and I was in,
Right.
it was just the whole world finally came off my shoulders at that point. It was so much just sitting there.
Well, and it's so hard for people looking, about at home and watching you and going, man, what's going on? What's with him? Like, why, but they don't realize, like, look at everything that was kind of just thrown last minute together just to try to make an appearance on a rookie debut on a course that you had never really driven before because you were in Pro 2. Never seen this before.
Yeah, and this track is, it's the streets of Long Beach. That track is really open for 2 weeks of the year.
Yeah.
During the Long Beach Grand Prix. So
right.
It's not like you can just go there and practice if they wanted to. The only time any FD driver or anyone gets to drive it is FD event or the Motegi Super Drift, which is
right.
the following weekend.
Right,
the only time that's open, yeah.